Hello and welcome to this episode of Numbers Don't Lie, the sales and marketing insights for accountants. I'm Janelle Sikora.
And I'm Brad Pinzer. And
And
today we have a special guest, Richard Sargent. How are you today, Richard?
Good. Excited to be here.
hey,
Excited.
Sarge. He also goes by Sarge. So we'll call you
Sarge.
Sarge. Sarge loves
Yeah.
tacos. Oh my God, it's Taco Tuesday.
Ooh,
I got my taco ready to go.
Yeah, look at that. So what we have for you today, so Sarge is a very special guest because what we want to do in several episodes is really get inside the mind of a small business owner. So our listeners, Sarge, are accountants and most of them are firm owners. And accountants want to do business with small business owners. And what's been really fascinating in this profession over the last several years is this shift and this transition from selling compliance, commodity type products like tax returns and bookkeeping to selling higher value services like business advisory planning, outsourced CFO services, exit planning, those types of things. So we thought it would be really helpful to kind of flip the script. And Brad and I are huge fans of messaging. We like to look at everything through the ideal client's eyes. So Sarge is a business owner. He owns a marketing agency. He also successfully built and exited a marketing agency and had so much fun, he decided to do it all over again. So without further ado, thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. 100%. I don't know if it was fun or it's just the only thing I know how to do for the record. So I just went back into it.
Yeah.
Well,
And also,
either
let me
way.
just add, just like a great guy, just a great guy.
Yeah.
I'll take
We
that.
love-
That's the
we
one.
love
That's
it.
the one right there.
Yes.
There you go. That's the most important thing for sure.
100%.
So tell us a little bit about your agency. Tell us about your business, both the
Yeah,
one
so-
that you sold and the one that you're in now.
Yeah, so we'll go one with sold first is that was actually kind of fun. I actually I think it ended up being like 32-page document to my former boss who we ran a web development agency. And I says, hey, once we do websites and everything else, they need to have marketing. It says, no, we have high profits on these big WordPress builds and everything else. We don't need to offer marketing. But what happens once the website launched, we had the awkward conversation about like kind of leave the house, right? We weren't offering anything else. I come from a career of doing Google ads for now over 20 years, right? So I'm sitting there, I'm like, well, we need to offer this. And so I built a big plan. It's for investors. So he wanted all the docs and all the schematics. I gave it to him and he said, no. And I said, well, what revisions do need to be made? I don't take objections lightly, right? And so I went, and after 3 times of telling me no, I said, you know what? I'm just going to take this document and do it on my own. I quit. I'm out. I'm leaving. So
Wow.
in the middle of the board meeting, everyone else, I quit. And I was a senior director in the agency, right? And so I quit. They ended up taking that, by the way, and doing it successfully, by the way. So they did it like 2 years later. They told me afterwards. But I started doing marketing, right, on my own, started getting clients, everything else, did really well. And I focused primarily on the lead generation side. So how do you get more leads into your business? The best part that I think will resonate with accountants the most is I'm a very numbers and logical guy. Now, what's hard about this that I'm just learning now after 20 years of doing this is how important emotions are in marketing and everything else, right? I was negating that and suppressing that. I was straight up just like, if the numbers make sense, then you'll work with me, right? And so I've been very numbers driven. And so that business actually sold to a real estate investment firm that had over 70 clients in their portfolio and wanted an internal marketing agency. So it was pretty creative in terms of how it worked out. The best part about this is I learned the most numbers from selling my business, not being in my business. I didn't realize how poor of a profit margin I had and how I didn't really focus on that. They said, hey, if you save a penny a million times, you're going to have $1,000,000. And I didn't think of stuff like that. I was like, oh, my software cost is only 4,000. They got it down to 400 a month, right? So just these things were like super aggressive. My person I didn't like at first, so I think this can resonate with a lot of small business owners. At first, the worst person on that team was the financial team on there, the accountants and so forth, because they were grilling me out of my comfort zone, right? But by selling that business, I understood what is a good profit margin, what should my labor rate be, what makes sense here, how much should I save, and so I learned a lot from that. And now going back into the agency I have now, it's actually cool to do this episode right now because as of like the first of the month, I am 100% out of the day to day in that agency.
Wow, that's
That's the first.
impressive.
Yep,
So
absolutely.
go back to the agency that you sold and you were talking about how much you learned. Is that because you partnered with, did you have an outsourced CFO?
No, so that's the best part is I've done dabbled in, and I had a bookkeeper for a really long time. Um, and just work with them on different things. But when I actually had someone that came in and started planning for future, not just for compliance, like you mentioned at the top, right? That's when stuff started to take off, and we actually saw how much we can actually grow in potential. We started having this thing, which I didn't know this existed, by the way. And keep in mind, I ran my agency for 8 years before I knew this existed. That you can have quarterly profit distributions in your agency. I never had that. I just left
Wow.
money there and didn't do anything with the money. We didn't take anything out, and so one of the proudest moments is looking at how much an agency owner can make, and then getting it felt like a 13th check every quarter. It's
Wow.
just like a whole 'nother monthly thing coming in, and then, "Okay, what do I do with that one now?" And so those were amazing things to see, and just like, I didn't know those things existed, and so someone says, "Yeah, this is how real business is done."
And it's
And who
But
so
no,
said
it's
that to
like,
you?
important that you pay yourself, right? Because like,
Hmm.
what's the point of doing all that work and everything if you're not
mhm,
getting the reward, right?
yeah,
Something like
absolutely.
Janelle and I are learning too, like just with our
Hmm.
business. So
Who,
I had a question just based on what you're saying. I mean, if so, if you had to do it all over again, I mean, like what, like one of the things is building a company with the intention of selling it, right? Like we all have to
Mhm,
have some type of exit plan. So, like,
mhm,
would you have done, like, what would you have done differently, right? Like, if you now
yeah.
that you know all this and you went through that experience.
Well, and that's the best part, and that's a really good question. My whole thing now is learn how to delegate everything faster to where it doesn't rely on you, right? Everything doesn't rely on you because here's the thing that I built the business around me as if I was an air traffic controller. If I wasn't up in that tower, everyone's at a standstill. No one's taking off and no one's landing because everything depends on me, right? And I feel like there's a lot of business owners, small business, marketing, whatever it may be, that are that same way. They built the business around them having a superhero cape versus them
mhm.
being able to run a business without them on
And
there.
you
So,
can't sell it if that's the
Yeah,
case. I mean, it's just
exactly.
not sellable.
No.
before we get too deep into like exiting strategy, let's go back to the role that your accountant played.
Hmm.
So, who taught you that you could take a quarterly profit distribution?
The partnership when I started to sell my agency, they're the first ones to ever explain that to me. Because before that, I would say the first 2 years, I went super cheap in terms of accounting, everything else, and then just ran into some issues because they were just, and they're small time, they're doing their own thing, right? So they just, hey, this is what you asked for, this is what I'm going to give you, versus like pushing back, like, well, you really need this. It was a second iteration where I had a company for over 7 years before I started a partnership, where they were the ones like, no, you need to do this better. Hey, my favorite thing, by the way, is getting a call in December saying I need to spend money for expenses to write
Right?
off.
That's the best
I
thing. Yeah.
And they were the first ones to do that for me. But we're talking now year 3 and 4, where they're like, hey, you actually need to write off stuff. And I'm like, what do I need to write off? Like, I was so excited for that, right? But you can write off, like, I never got that. And then it was when they came in, and I'm telling you right now, it felt like the highest of a honeymoon met with like some morbid thing that happens in terms about like, hey, we're partnering. Richard, you got to cut everything. I'm like, what? Or they also built the plan of, Richard, if you go from where you are, which was at 40,000, right, recurring revenue per month, you need to go from 40,000 to 100,000. Build that plan for us. You also are going to go from 40,000 to zero. Build that plan for us. What happens when and where? By having that plan in place, I knew every decision that needed to be made. And they
Right.
also helped me to understand what you're actually trying to hire this labor capacity. I need you to struggle from 40 to 50K on that role. Don't hire for that role right there. You'll actually lose profit margin and actually hurt the business. So you can't hire for that role. Normal Richard would be overstaffed all the time,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? But I would be overstaffed. But then say we lose a couple clients or anything else, I would stay overstaffed. They're the ones that taught me like how to methodically approach this. And that some people that are hired full time, you set expectations about, hey, your current role isn't as established as well. We are going to start you part time. If we do find that we're creating more demand, we will move you to full time. But at some point, you might go back to part time just as we're getting this solved, right? We predict this is going to be about a 3 month up and down, but we won't go up and down with you every single week. We'll do it probably every quarter until it's established. I only had to do that 2 times, which I'm grateful for, but they told me how to set better expectations. Thank you,
So
Mac Reactions.
this is so fascinating because what you're telling me you learned from the partners is exactly what our accounting firm clients want to do for small
Yes.
business owners. So help me with that a little bit. What would you tell an accounting firm who's like, wait a minute, why did you have to learn that from these partners who bought your agency? If you would have just, worked with us as advisors, what would you say to them in terms of like how to get that message out, um, how to present themselves a little bit differently to small business owners to help business owners understand that if I'm an accounting firm, those are the problems that I solve. I can help you determine when to hire someone, when not to hire someone, what sort of quarterly distributions to take, what sorts of things that you can and can't write off. And if you know that proactively, there's so much beauty there because you're not going to have surprises in April and be stressed out like, 80% of business owners are.
100%. So that's one. I think this is going to be the most valuable part right here. The two things that they need to go and approach the small businesses is two things. Can I get an evaluation of your business and an independent one from us? And then we can compare those two numbers. Go in there and say, for the purpose of our accounting firm investing and partnering your business, right? If that's their hook, now it doesn't mean they have to. That's their hook and says, we want to prepare you for an exit or partnership. So let's go through these three things. Independent audit on us, from us to you, right? Another independent auditor to see how valuable your business is, right? And then what it would look like for us to partner in your agency, right? Now, not your agency, your small business, right? But if they took that approach, that would set a different mindset from the business owner right now, just like, oh, I'm just trying to do it. Because here's the thing that happened that kind of, I think, crushed me morally more and egotistical, right? Back in the day of just understanding business is surrounded by me. I was everything, right? And they said, hey, Richard, if you're in this business and you become an employee after buying the business, this is worth probably about like with revenue and everything else, you're probably at 1.5. If you sold this business and everything else right now, it's worth 200,000. So that's a big gap. And it sounds like, oh, that sounds like that'd be really cool. But that means I'd have to become an employee for it to be valuable,
Mm-hmm.
which really meant there's actually no value in what I built. Right.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, this is fascinating. Okay, so go back to the audit there for a minute.
Mhm.
So if I'm an accounting firm owner and I'm listening, going, okay, how do I shift this mindset with small business owners? And you just said to me, offer to do an independent audit. Now,
Mhm.
audit in your mind versus audit in an accountant's mind are probably two totally different things because
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
actually went to school for accounting and worked for a big four firm on their audit team. And woo, hence to say, I decided that was not the career for me. So anyhow, define what you mean by that exactly.
Audit in terms of business valuation to sell. Like if
Okay.
you had to sell and you got an audit from someone, right? What would that look like? Because here's the best part. They audited me with their team, and then they got independent audit as well from someone completely outside their firm, right? And
Ooh.
they even allowed me to choose from three different independent auditors of which one I wanted to deal with because they were going to come and grill me. So I got to chose who was going to come and cook me, basically, right? They said, talk to these three people, choose one, we'll pay for that, right? So they went and paid for the independent audit. That person was not mean at all, but they were very, I would say, stoic in their approach. But by the end of it, let's just say I did not invite them over for a barbecue. I did not like them because they exposed the truth about who I was and what I was about, right? But this
Right.
also gave deeper insights for the people that were about to buy me in the due diligence process. And then what ended up happening is they took their two numbers. They said, Richard, our numbers are more optimistic from what we're seeing. But the independent auditor was like, they were the ones who were like, hey, if Richard was to sell this right now, it might be worth 200,000 just because of the 40,000 in cash flow. But every other asset isn't worth it. And that was in their audit. And I still remember that and I have it written down.
Wow,
So
that's
I have
My
a
really
business
cool.
question.
isn't worth it.
Yeah. So so at the time, I mean, were you even thinking about exit or any of that kind of stuff? Like when you built the company, like was there any intention there?
I,
And when did that change for you?
yeah, so that's a really good question. I had no intentions. I didn't know that you could exit a business like that. I didn't think I was anywhere close to that. They did set up a very good thing. They did take me to barbecue, right? They also took me to tacos at different points. but they sat me down so we can actually talk about it versus being stuck around anything else. And they said, hey, this is our goal and their vision, because they saw what my vision was. And they said, this is what our vision is. Can we do it? It was actually, it wasn't like a turnkey sell it and then get lots of money to take off. It was a 2-year transition on there. So it was one of those things about like, hey, this is our goal. This is our intentions. It's going to take 2 years, right? Let's set up a 2-year roadmap. It can go faster with incentives or it could go slower, right? But it wasn't like they were the ones that they did this and they showed me their portfolio, right? They did this over 70 times where they acquired other businesses. For instance, they ran a real estate portfolio, and I'm not going to mention names on there, but their assets under management was over $1 billion. So it was more affordable for them to go buy a credit card processing company than it was to use anyone else.
Wow.
So they could go acquire a company for 2 to 5 million, and that was more affordable for them than transaction fees. You know, so then, hey, Richard and his vision of what he's doing, because, and here's the thing, and I'll give you my secret strategy here, right? The thing that, well, it's not so secret anymore, it's public, but the thing that got them to believe my vision, I said, I'm really building a marketing agency so that I can invest in other small businesses, right, and know how to acquire them, and all I have to do is hire an operator. But I have
Mhm.
these systems in place. And they said, well, show us the systems. And so they challenged me. They said, what happens if you're to come partner in our real estate investment firm, which was their main holdings, right? And they said, I was like, oh, well, I would do these different things. They said, okay, well, we'll hire you for marketing. We crushed it. We got like 2 million the first year, 4 million the second year. And you know what's the crazy part about this? This is during pandemic times and everything else.
Wow.
So like we were doing really well, and they said, okay, well, we've seen who you are as a vendor, as a marketing agency. We want to buy your agency because we have 70 other clients that need to go through the same thing that you just went through with us. So they bought my vision and everything else. And I think that's the only reason why it sold. So it wasn't a on paper, it looked great. It was more visionary, but then it turned into, can Richard actually execute on that vision, which took time. It wasn't a
So
Right.
turnkey, everything figured
they
out.
really bought it because of you, not so much like the business itself. It was really
Mhm.
more like it's, people. They're buying
Yeah.
people. Right.
And I would share on there, and the reason why I'm so crazy about the past experiences, and I think we've both talked about this before, but I feel like this would be relevant, is that's why I'm so crazy about SOPs and processes, because that's what
Mm.
took the 2 years to go and build out. It took me 2 years in there, and I've shared this before, but my role full time was actually 6 different roles done poorly. I was in 6 roles poorly versus 6 full-time roles done that. When I saw 6 other people take my roles off one at a time and I saw how well they're doing it, it had tears in my eyes because I'm like, they're all doing it collectively better than I could ever do that. I need to hire and have better processes and basically download everything in my brain. That's why I'm so hardcore about that. Talk to me, now 3 years ago from this, right? When I sold and everything else and got started, I would be like, oh, I'm not writing down anything. If you don't know how to do this, you suck. Like I had negative attitude towards this. But now you guys see me and I'm like coming in zen, hitting a gun like the SOP in one, and you guys are like, well, who's this guy? That wasn't me when I first started. I've been converted.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so this brings up another great question, which is, my question for you is, so the same accounting firm owners who are outsourced CFOs, many of them are also business advisors, and they want to help business owners set goals, achieve goals, surpass milestones, etc. And many of them have a lot of operational expertise and excellence, and they've built teams in their firms that are not just accountants. So if they're also wanting to put that message out there to a small business owner that what you just said, SOPs are everything. Most small business owners don't have a clue how to create an SOP, right? So
Mhm.
how would a business advisory firm again kind of reinvent that mindset of the small business owner to say, hey, this is what we do. Reach out. This is how we can help you.
Absolutely. I think they just need to go through some of their core beliefs on there.
Mhm.
Now, there's that movie Inside Out 2, and there's core beliefs that we all have, right? And they visualize it beautifully. If we look at the core beliefs that we have as a business owner, some of them are, I do this to survive. But if I'm doing this to do a bigger purpose or anything else, and that firm can come in and help establish that mindset, then they can come in and be like, okay, well, what steps does it take to get there? What will also help is just a social proof of how have they helped someone else do really well, right?
Mhm.
Because,
Mhm.
like, for instance, and they didn't flaunt this, but when I looked at my name, because the agency name was a Sargent, like my last name, so I don't know the military version. I didn't have any E's in there like crazy. But when they did SAR from my name, right? And I saw some of the biggest names in town right surrounded around me, and their client portfolio at the bottom said 4,000. And I was in a meeting with them, like, oh, this is a big firm. Like, this is really cool. So, like, social proof mattered for me, but just also
Mhm.
what can you help me do? The other part about SOPs and what I feel like accountants can do as well is
Mhm.
learn how to change their verbiage to transfer of knowledge. What does their
Yes.
whole collective team know that can be condensed down to something that can be given, right?
Right.
And so if they go out there and can build an on demand, which I think you guys can definitely help them do, on demand course, right? And it could be simple stuff about like, what should every small business owner do? Because I always feel like, and I keep going back to this, and every single time I talk about this, I get this itch to go and do it, right? But I have to hold back because it's still shiny for me right now. Is how can I give away every single market advice possible, right?
Mhm.
How can I
Mhm.
just give it away? No, you don't have to sign in and you can just go do that. What if accountants were able to do a small portion of that? Because here's the thing, if someone went through that, then they would come through a better believer in their process and they would be more agreeants versus the typical, like, wait, don't you guys do just taxes? You know what I mean?
Mhm. Mhm.
Right. You just gotta all your communication, all your it all has to be insightful, right?
Mhm.
Mhm.
Like you have to just give that
Educational.
away. I mean,
Yeah.
No, I
yeah,
think yeah.
educational, but like
Yeah.
it has to be insightful. But speaking of education, I mean, at the time when you were going through this process, right? Like you didn't know as much as you know now, right? So
Mhm.
at that time, if an accounting firm's coming to you, there's going to be some level of education. That's what you're talking about right here.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so, I mean, are you prepared if you go back to yourself at that moment where like are you prepared to receive that kind of
Mm.
information? You know, like
No.
how do you kind of
Mhm.
navigate that? How would an accounting firm navigate that, you know?
Yeah, that's a really good question because I think the hardest part of that is I had to change my belief and vision towards what my business could be. I didn't have that strong of belief and vision. Mine was keep making money and see where this goes. So I didn't have anything else in the mindset. And so if a firm comes in there and says, hey, really look at what we can do together or what you can really do and what your potential is, right? You have potential. And even it's not just what the end potential is, but even just a high overview roadmap of it. It's kind of like if you show a map of the whole United States, you see the whole United States, and you could draw a line from LA to New York, and then you can even put stop points on the whole way, right? Even if they're flying, like here's things that you're going to see on this flight. If you can build that for them, and if they can see themselves being in that plane and going through that journey, then it's really asking them and confirming them what do they want to achieve, but open their eyes. And I'm telling you right now, I call it takes a season, it doesn't take a moment. It takes a season of belief and change. It doesn't take just a moment of you're not going to talk to them one time and they're going to believe. It
Mhm.
takes several small seeds to be planted in order to grow that forest. And as you grow that, you'll start to see it nurture. But it's anything else, right? You can plant something like we just taught our daughter who's 7 how to plant. She's watering stuff and she's like, hey, I just put water in. Why is it not coming up? I'm like, it doesn't happen like that. And we're like, patience, time. Like we're trying to teach her these moments, but how do you teach those same principles from your perspective on accounting for small business owners? And here's the best part that I learned about business owners. My first 8 years before actually starting to sell my agency felt like year one or year two on repeat. So a lot of agents, a lot of businesses are probably feeling that same thing on there
Mhm.
versus just showing them how to elevate, how to do more. And it takes seasons. And so you can't put one blog post and make everything change and change a whole belief. If you even, and I'm going to go on a very light, so I won't go deep on here. From a religious perspective, there's several religions out there, but not everyone is slapped on the head and believe right away, right? And there's so
Mhm.
much out there. So as a firm and everything else, come back to your core beliefs and what do you stand for and who are you fighting for, right? Who's on your side? People will come to you saying, you believe in me. I fight for this industry. I do this. I do that. You can do multiple, so it doesn't have to be you have to be chosen one. But imagine you said, "Hey, I'm fighting for the home service is an industry, and this is how we helped it out. And here's 3 cases of how we helped them and where they started." One last thing on that, we have a client that came back to us, right? She comes back and comes forth, right? She's seasonal. She works with teachers, right? So of course it's seasonal for her. Her first 9 months with us as a marketing agency sucked. We got no results.
Really?
We offered a lot of free stuff and just never hit it until we found the message that worked. Once we found the message that worked, within 1 month, she made back all 9 months worth of investment from ads and from everything we did. She was getting 36-to-1 return. So for every dollar she invested, she was getting $36 back. I just got a report right from her, because we run our reports at the first of the month for our clients, right? She was getting leads for 40 cents. 40 cents on there, right? Not
Wow.
typical, by the way, so don't anything else. But once you can help someone get past their belief and start making it, that's what it takes on there. So it's building that up. And so if people can do that with others, you'll see great success with them together.
And are you saying that message that caused that whole shift is really due to, you know, knowing what your values are and your mission and all that kind of stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Because I'll tell you, I've researched that so much, like the values and mission, and you know, Donald Miller, Story Brand, he has a good you know lesson for that he teaches.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I know it was important, but I could never really see like how it like fits together with everything else in the big picture. And it's only very recently that I'm really understanding how critical that is, to know what your values are. And you know, it helps you create your mission, and it's related to your message, all that stuff. It's all, and culture is huge,
Yeah.
particularly like internally with your team. And so I'm seeing how all that fits together. But the reason I'm saying that is because then it helps you with that one change that you just said, where, you know, all of a sudden, you know, the floodgates opened, you know. So that's why all of those things, all those pieces are so critical, because it allows you, it puts you in that position where you can have that right positioning and message that you need to be successful.
Yeah. And I'll add 2 points to that. That just it's oozing out of me right now. So I'm grateful I had restraint versus cutting off, right? Is when you're talking through there, is we got to remember 2 things. People have to have different self-worth outside of their business. Help them to build that. If they have to
Mm.
detach themselves from the business, they are worth it and they are worthy. They are building something outside of them. I made the mistake of naming the agency after my last name, so I was tied to the agency. If we did well, if we lost a client, I was tied to that roller coaster of emotions. The other part is that if you can go and help small businesses to be the superheroes in their communities, you're going to make a difference. Can they leave the meeting on a high versus overwhelmed? Can they leave the meeting saying, I'm ready to suit up and go serve this community? Can you help
Mhm.
small businesses to achieve that and understand their worth in the community? If you can tie them to that principle right there of community and their worth, they want to go home. It's just like any other team members. They want to go home a hero. They don't want to go home beaten and bruised from the day, right? From all the work that they had to do. If you can help them to achieve that, you're going to build a culture of winners. It's absolutely amazing what we can do, even from a firm perspective as an outside coming in. Install that belief in them, help them to understand what they can do, establish that mission statement, like, why are you here today? Right? And help them to understand that. You'll have people in tears understanding how much they've gained in their life and their worth that they're providing to themselves, to their families, their team members, and their community. You can make a huge impact.
So Sarge, there's so much about this episode that if I'm an accounting firm owner, I'm gonna probably want to go back and listen to this 3 times and take notes, because there's a lot to unpack. So
Mhm.
as we wrap up, what would you say that the biggest takeaway from this episode should be? If I'm an accounting firm owner, I'm listening to you, I want so badly to just bring in a few more small business clients that I can really partner with. What would be the biggest takeaway from this episode?
Yeah. And so it's going to summarize all of it, right? Grab a chair. The reason why I say grab a chair to sit in the business, in the owner's establishment. Go to their business and grab a chair and see what they go through and see how you impact what they're going through.
I
Because
love
a
it.
lot of what they're going through they're not thinking about you every single moment when they first start, but they need to be, right?
That's
Grab a
it.
chair, understand what they're doing, listen to them, and have conversations. Conversions of belief only happen through conversations. So if you talk to them more, even through, blog posts, social media, everything else, but invite them to have conversations with you. If you have more conversations with your local businesses and anyone else that you serve, you will have a better pulse on what it is. When people go and it's come up to election seasons, right? is that everyone's campaigning, but do they really listen to what people want and need? If you can do that in your local community with everything that we talked about, all the golden nuggets before this, you will have a far better impact in your local area versus just compliance. You can make an impact. And I am personally excited for you. I might not know you, but if you're listening to this right now, I am excited for you and what you can do, and don't change. Stay who you are.
Love it.
Keep doing what you're doing.
This is so good because I believe it at the core of my DNA that accountants are such amazing problem solvers. It is all about the knowledge transfer and education and helping small business owners understand what they can do. And then one other thing you said that bears repeating is it's a season, not a second. Is that how you said it?
Season, not a moment. It
Season,
takes a
not a
season.
moment. So true. It's not immediate gratification. But the thing is, you have to start, right? You have to start somewhere. You have to commit to it, and you have to be patient, knowing that results will happen over time.
But also, it seems to me like just knowing what's possible, you know, like for instance, like with the, you know, the breaking the 4-minute mile, right? No one could do it. And then finally somebody did it. And then now all of a sudden everyone's doing it. Like, you know, it's just knowing what's possible really changes everything. I have one more question about, so you said, you know, your business was worth, you know, $230,000. And then if you did a couple of changes, it was, you know, 1.5 million, which is, you know, a huge difference. Was learning that like the critical thing to make you be like, oh my God, or was there something else? Or was that like the main part of it?
No, yeah. Kudos for catching that. That was a main part of understanding that it needed to be bigger than myself. That without me involved. And here's the thing is that since I'm a recurring business, it wasn't because I was acquiring tons of clients. It's because we had a strong retention with our clients and a really long retention rate. But if Richard's not here, then those clients also go. So if Richard's not here and if there's not support built around them, right, then this won't happen. And so understanding that there need to be more support built for those clients and everything else. And some of those clients are still with them today and having just the best of times and just doing amazing things with them, right? But that needed to be built and established. And that didn't take a moment. It took seasons, not just one season, but seasons to do. And so understand the importance of that. That's why I'm going to build so many, like with the new agency and everything else, I'm going to build so many new rock stars that if they ever leave us, they're going to become proud alumni of what we've done here. And they're going to make a bigger impact in this world. So I know I'm not keeping every team member, but I hope they make bigger impacts than everything else we do.
That's awesome. And so it took seasons, but is that because you didn't start out doing the right things? It took longer, but now when you're building these new companies, you're probably designing it from the get-go with all that in mind. So it's probably a lot quicker to get to where you need to be.
It's not quicker because I'm not the one leading the charge. Okay. It actually takes longer, but you know, I've had to install a lot more of patience and understanding.
Interesting.
So okay. I'm now a stakeholder in my agency. And so we have 3 30-minute meetings a week, right? After work and everything else. So like at the end of their work days. And it's just talking about like, what have we gained is something. So like Gap versus Gain is another book that I really love, is what have we gained this week? What are we still looking to do? Right? That's all the question we do. And we actually had one, we have one later today. We had one yesterday, but what happened in that meeting? We ended the meeting in tears. Because everyone finally started catching the vision, right? Yeah. Of this, of what we can really do. And they start understanding their impact in the vision and why they are here. It's basically like, why are they enlisted to doing this? And by them understanding that will impact seasons to come.
That's amazing. I mean, many people are just, you know, they're in some job that, you know, has no meaning other than it's just a way to make money. And, you know, to have people in tears, you know, feeling, you know, so passionate about what they're doing and growing is amazing.
Yep, 100%.
Richard, you have been amazing. I really appreciate, Brad and I both really appreciate that you've come on and shared so much insight, because I really do think that this episode is going to be something that everyone listens to multiple times. There's a million gold nuggets and Easter eggs in this. So absolutely. Thank you so much for being on with us today. We are going to wrap things up, and we hope that everyone enjoys this episode as much as we have. And we look forward to the next one. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for having
Richard.
me.
Thank you.